When we think about moving such an application environment to the cloud, where the resources could be geographically spread, and you're not exactly sure of where these resources are coming from, you have to adjust to the possibility that performance could be affected in such an environment. The issue of performance is going to be key, and you would have to seriously take a look at the application's architecture to see whether it is going to be able to perform at the same level on a WAN environment, or perhaps a mixed environment where part of the application resides within your own data center and a part of the application is outsourced to run in a cloud environment. Right? Typically, when you introduce a wide area network into an application environment, it is going to cause performance issues, and re-architecting is going to be required for such an environment explicitly. So I think that's something you have to take into account before you blindly move any applications over to the cloud. There are two ways of looking at this. One is that you could think of applications to be composed of either OLTP applications, which actually have live customers at one end interacting in a transactional manner with your applications. Or of course, certainly there are batch applications which are offline, run offline, such as say end of the day books, adjustment in a stock depository or things like that. Now applications which are OLTP in nature, you have to be a little wary of moving to the cloud environment if you're not guaranteed the quality of service that is going to be given by the resources that you're actually renting in such an environment. Because performance is very key, and you could easily turn a customer off if the application slows down by an order of magnitude or even less than that. Now, batch applications which are actually run in an offline manner is something that you would think about transitioning first to lower the risk of making this movement. Right? At the same time, even batch applications in places like the stock exchanges and the depositories have a very short time window where they have to execute. Typically, stock exchanges today are open later and later in the day, and before the next working day, the stock exchange opens for the next working day, you would have to do all the end of the day settlements and be done with that. And you typically have a few hours of a time window in order to complete this. So you still have to be very concerned about getting the quality of service from whatever infrastructure that you are getting from a cloud in order to make sure that this processing can be completed in that time window. Right, so I think it's very critical to set up SLAs. There is a complete absence of standards in the area of infrastructure as a service clouds. Right, so if you're just renting machines from EC2, it is going to look very different from renting machines from somebody else, because the API that EC2 gives you from Amazon may be entirely different than what somebody else gives you. So that issue of vendor lock-in is something that you have to be concerned about, and if you're willing to stick with a particular vendor, then you'll have to negotiate the terms that would be suitable to you up front, because you don't have the flexibility of moving off of this environment to another vendor very easily today. Usually the technology comes up, it is adopted because of the features and the advantages of the technology, and then people realize that they need to have competition in order to improve the quality of what is being offered, as well as the set of standards, so that you could move seamlessly from one provider to another and have that flexibility of choice of vendors. And then standards begin to be formed at such point in time. So there's enough pressure from the customers for vendors to come together and create a standard so that they increase the adoption of the technology. And so that's the standard life cycle, and we are going through that life cycle even in the case of cloud computing. Right? Today, we don't have a whole lot of standards in the infrastructure as a service space, but clearly they're needed, otherwise you're going to end up with vendor lock-in. But if you take a look at software as a service, it started with the evolution of web services standards before SaaS became known as a cloud kind of a service. Right? So there are a certain set of domain-independent horizontal standards that are available, but they would have to be supplemented by domain-specific vertical standards specific to the industry. So if you're looking at the finance industry, and if you're looking at software as a service in the finance industry, you would need to have certain web service interfaces be available that are standardized. Right? This is like standardizing ontologies if you were to share data. A very good example of this is Rosetta.net, where in the semiconductor space, they had actually standardized a set of data types that were going to be exchanged among semiconductor manufacturing vendors. right? As a result of which I would be able to freely exchange data amongst these people. Now the same thing would have to happen in the case of software as a service as well. So I think the emergence of standards is going to happen, but it is going to follow that maturity life cycle, maturity curve, and we are not yet there for infrastructure as a service. Now, platform as a service and software as a service are different ball games, and I suspect that software as a service would reach some consensus sooner in terms of standards, vertical standards, assuming that they're all going to adopt the web services standard for exposing services horizontally, which I think is happening already.